Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. It is another uncertified episode. We had an awesome guest lined up for you all that we're so excited to have on the show soon. Unfortunately, they had to cancel a little bit last minute, but they're not off the hook. If you're listening, you got to come on the show. You said you would. We're going to be a little hard about that. So we'll see you very soon. This is your first episode of Certified Forgotten. We are a two-part show. Every week we release an hour-long episode with a wonderful guest. Every other week, or in this case twice in a row, we release Uncertified, which is our series where we talk about a newer release in 30 minutes or less. And we're always happy when we can talk about something the day that it hits movie theaters. And that's what we're doing right now with this episode on Heretic, right, Donato?
We are appropriately timely, but that's not something we usually do. So yeah, we really crushed this one. It's we didn't try to, but still we lucked into it.
Now the mood is weird. The vibes are off. This is an election week, and I think one of us happens to be in a safely blue state. One of us is in a terrible red state. But I will open this up since this is a movie that is inherently political. We can talk a little bit about politics at the top of the hour. How are you doing? How are you feeling in this day two of understanding the world that we're about to inherit?
I went for a run yesterday in Los Angeles, and within a minute, I'm not even kidding, a single minute, I was standing at the crosswalk and a Cybertruck with American flags draped everywhere, blaring bullshit music, stopped in the middle of the crosswalk, did not let anyone turn or pass, started flipping everybody off, and then the minute the light turned red, sped off and just kept flipping everybody off. So, anyway, thanks a lot, everyone.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, that's fun, right? That's just going to be the next little bit for us. But, hey, on the good news, we're all on Blue Sky now. Everybody's left Twitter. I think this was sort of like the final nail in the coffin of everyone coming over to the platform. So if you haven't already joined up with Blue Sky, Certified Forgotten has an account. Donato and I have an account. It's hit critical mass. All the people you want to follow are there now. So that's a great opportunity for you to get off that platform and get on the right one or a better one, whatever. Um, we still have movies. And we still have a movie that I think a lot of people are going to find cathartic now, I guess. We can do the plot synopsis and then talk a little bit about this movie and how we both felt about it. That's how the show's supposed to work, right? Yeah,
It's
great.
usually how it works. We just, it's a special week here. We're really dating ourselves with this episode. It's, you know exactly when this was and what year.
Yeah, good vibes. All right, anyways, I wrote some stuff down. Why don't I read it but sound like I'm improvising it off the top of my head? How far would you be willing to go to convince someone of your beliefs? That's a good question for Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, a pair of Mormon missionaries determined to spread the good word to their new community. When the sisters are invited into the home of Mr. Reed, a cheerful and well read religious scholar, they are grateful for the opportunity to bring a new sheep into the fold. But as their conversation turns dark, and then darker still, the women realize that faith may not be enough to save them. Written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, Heretic is the perfect three-hander for our, inexplicably, both post and pre-Trump America. Donato, what did you think of Heretic?
So, I am not going to hide that I am one of the very few negative reviews on Rotten Tomatoes for Heretic. I'm one of the very few who did not like it at a Fantastic Fest, and that has not changed. I let me put it this way. I understand what it's going for. I understand every part of the conversation. I understand control being God. It's all laid out there. I we'll talk about it, but where I swerve is everyone seeing the pivot to control and away from, all the religious stuff and what we get, where I loved this movie in the parlor. I loved every part
Mm-hmm.
of really digging into the nitty gritty. And again, I will save the larger thoughts for later, but just getting out in front of it, I know we are very opposed on this. I know we are quite not on the same page on Heretic. And I genuinely think a lot of the reasons why you love this movie, and most of moviegoers, I'm not gonna, sugarcoat this. I'm on my own island here, but I do not like this movie for the most reason, or sorry, I do not like this movie for the reasons that most people enjoy it. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. This is top 10 all the way for me this year. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why I think Heretic is good. And I will give you this. I think that the first half 2/3, whatever you want to call it, of Heretic before they go downstairs, is the by far the best part of the movie. You know, if you told me that the entirety of Heretic was just the three of them talking about religion in the dining room, or in the parlor room, and then later on in his study, like, I would have watched that whole movie, because Heretic is really at its best, I think, when it's sort of this fencing match between two people of varying commitment to their ideologies, and one person who has no ideology, who is a nihilist in the truest sense, um, and is willing to explore all the various inconsistencies and holes in religion in order to prove his broader points. I'm going to stop there and say that let's throw the spoiler warning out early, because once you start to talk about the nuts and bolts of the conversation, even if you're not talking about the plot, you're talking about the dance, and the dance in this movie is by far the best part of it, and I don't want to ruin any of that for you. So if you want to see it, if you haven't seen it, take a pause here, go see it. It's worth it. Go see it in theaters. You're going to want to see it with a crowd. The crowd reactions to this, I think, are going to be a lot of fun. If you're still here, that dance to me is everything. The conversation they have with Mr. Reed, the fact that Mr. Reed is the world's greatest bullshit artist, and it basically is trying to divide and conquer them in real time about what they may or may not believe in. That's so fascinating. Like, it is such a dangerously loaded conversation that goes on for like a good 30 to 40 minutes.
And not only does it do that, it does go on for, I kind of feel like this movie is halves instead of three acts.
Yeah,
It
I agree.
very much feels like it goes from act one straight into act three. And while that is a detriment to it, once again, I will reiterate that I adored this movie for the conversation, for that conversation, and not only the way it handles speaking about religion pretty eloquently and across the board, but like, we introduce Mormon sisters. You would think that maybe there was going to be a hammering down on Mormonism itself and some kind of, I don't want to say bias, but like, get stuck in the Mormon of it all.
Yep.
But Heretic is very good at being level headed. It is just addressing religion across the board, and it is quite cleverly written in doing so. Like
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff that weaves in the Jar Jar Binks, and that sounds like a really funny joke, but at the same time, Hugh Grant of all people being able to so charmingly and so eloquently speak to all of this stuff and tie together fandoms and cultism and religion, like however you feel about religious beliefs and what comes next, all of that stuff, there is such an engaging conversation to be had around all of that material. You couldn't have picked a better performer to deliver it all, and also both of the sisters. I mean, like, we have Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. Like, they're doing tremendously,
Yeah.
running with the vibes of being two sisters who've been brought up devout, and they believe in the tablets and all this stuff. But when they are challenged, there is a good push back and forth there. Like, they stand their ground, but also hear what he's saying. And I could have watched that, as you said, for the other half of the movie. I think this movie falls apart when you get to the second half. And I think when it tries to become the more horror first picture, it doesn't have the juice.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there in a second. I want to talk a little bit about Hugh Grant's performance, and to your point, what you were saying about the way it tackles religion, right? Because I think in this, media landscape, we're used to seeing that kind of, we'll call it the Ben Shapiro approach, right? Where basically you just bull rush your opponent. That is the thing. That is the gold standard of intellectual debate in America in 2024, is where you talk so fast and you throw so much stuff out there and you just like, you aggressive, 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 aggressive. You don't give your opponent an opportunity to catch a break, and then you slap it up on YouTube and you say like Ben Shapiro dominated or crushed or whatever, because it's about like winning those micro moments that work as good ads. There's a way that, there's a version of this movie that could have done that, right? Where it is like aggression and bull rush. Hugh Grant is way too good of an actor to do anything like that. And of all the things that I've seen from Beck and Woods, and I like the first Quiet Place. I'm like the one person in the world to like the Adam Driver movie. I didn't even like the Adam Driver movie, but I liked it more than everybody else, so I give
I'm
myself
I'm
credit for
team
that.
I'm team with you. I'm team with you.
Okay,
Dinosaurs, man. Like, whatever.
yeah, 61 or 65 or whatever it was. What he does as Mr. Reed is playful. And I think that's what makes it such a good dynamic, is that initially, as you're getting to know the character, he is not like he's not out to make them to like prove them wrong immediately, right? Like his point is not to get them to like admit that he's right or anything like that. He's showing off a little bit. And I think I thought of this when I was watching the movie. I think of this now like it's the greatest epitome of the line from The Big Lebowski. You're not wrong, you're just an asshole. Like that is 100% what Mr. the character of Mr. Reed is in this movie. And because Hugh Grant has these two modes that he gets into most often, kind of like the bumbling, genteel, like friendly, foppish kind of guy, but he also has like a tremendous asshole streak in him. Like you listen to him do interviews, he fucking does not like doing interviews with people. He can come across as the biggest asshole in interviews. And you need somebody with that kind of duality who can thread the needle from a character that is always nice enough to keep them in the room, but always like it's that thing. Like the entire performance is him saying something that's kind of mean, and then like moving on before they recognize he was just an asshole to them. That's the performance, and it's incredible. It's like it is without question the best Hugh Grant performance of his career.
Because how many horror movies have we watched? And one of the biggest issues with the storytelling is, well, like, why are these characters in this scenario? Why does this keep going forward?
Yes.
Why? And once again, like Beck and Woods find a way to keep the sisters there. I mean, there's never a point where, to your credit, Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, like he keeps them butts in seats. He gives them a reason to stay around, and he is just nice enough. Again, quotes around nice, but as the old man next door kind of trope, he does give them a reason to stay around. And I mean, could you poke holes again in the way that they just blindly walk into the scenario? Yeah, but at the same time, there is this religious ideology that protects them. In their
Yeah.
mind, he can't be evil because we live in a world that is just and right and all this stuff. And I hear people talking about politics now the same way. If we're gonna touch on that briefly, but like, oh, like Trump can't be evil, he can't be that hateful, but like no, he is. I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you're not willing to engage with it, that's on you. That's not on anyone else. And there's a little bit of that here with the sisters when they're not willing to see Mr. Reed for what he is, because he does telegraph earlier on than before the second half and before the basement doors open. You can tell something is not right. And that is from a character's perspective. That's not even from
Yeah.
the benefit of the audience's perspective. So we understand, the characters should understand, but it still makes sense why they don't. So like, I want to give Beck and Woods credit here, because it was very hard to establish the scenario, turn it into a chamber piece, and give it a reason to keep going. And I think they do for quite a long time, and then they don't. And I think that then they don't is, I remember what they said. I forget which one, but they did the intro at Fantastic Fest, and they said, "Hey, we made a horror movie that was completely or almost completely silent. So we challenged ourselves to make a horror movie that's almost completely conversations." And I think that damaged the second half so tremendously, because the more and more he kept talking about control, and the more and more, like, we get it. We get control as God. We get all this stuff. People are terrible. They only just want to be in control, and that's it. And they want to rule the world. I, I didn't think there was anything revolutionary about that, though. And like, all of the smartness and all of the intelligence of the movie prior just kind of evaporated for me. And it became this, hey, let's try to do a barbarian where shit gets weirder and weirder. And then it just ends. That was not for me. Like, I don't think that Beck and Woods writing horror, I guess to say, is one of my favorite usages of them, because once again, I didn't mind the Dino movie, but you know what? I don't like Haunt, and I understand that's one of the other movies that I am in the minority on, and
Yeah.
I don't think the way they write horror speaks to me directly, and that's fine because it apparently speaks to so many other people. But I am part of the horror watching community. I am a horror critic. This is what we do, and I, the way Heretic specifically falls apart for me is so uninteresting.
Yeah. So there's I'm gonna have to disagree with you there, Matthew. There are two things that I think the movie does, two inversions that it saves for its last 20 minutes or so, that I think are really good. Right. So the first is that, and this is a pure matter of preference. The first is that the film sets it up as if Mr. Reed is doing this miracle. He takes the girls down at the basement. He says, "You're going to witness a miracle." He claims to have found this new faith. And like, there's a very funny call out moment where, Thatcher's Sister Barnes basically says, "I feel like this got sweaty and you're kind of bullshitting as you go, which is exactly what he's doing. His purpose in all of this is to see how far he can push characters while they still cling to their religion and when he can break them on the other side of it. So he is sort of like making it up as he goes a little bit. And Hugh Grant is able to add sort of like an improvisatory air to it where you're like, oh, yeah, he's just like bullshitting a whole bunch of different, ideologies. The line about this is all VR, like that is either going to be huge, like that fake twist is either going to really, really work for you or it's not. And it really worked for me because it's such a, again, like the Mr. Reed is sort of like a dumb person's idea of a smart man at times, and I think that stuff like that is such a good evidence of that. But that's not even why I was with this movie until the very end. The reason why I was with this movie until the very end, the other inversion that it does, which is more subtle and absolutely delicious as someone who had and lost faith, is that the characters that you think where they fall, like what their relationship is and what their devoutness is wrong. The movie is misleading you in that. Sophie Thatcher, dressed kind of punk, she has claimed, they talk early, that she's the one that's converted more people, and she kind of like shrugs it off like it's not a big deal. They set you up to think that she's the one because at the very beginning, Mr. Reed says, "One of you is not who you seem." You think that Sophie Thatcher's character is the one that is sort of like less faithful or is losing her faith because she fits the mold. But the big reveal is that it's Chloe East's character. It's Sister Paxton that is the one that is like struggling and is having a crisis of faith, which is the reason why she's the one of the two of them that hasn't actually converted anybody when they're on the thing. So the way that inverts kind of all of the experiences that we've had thus far between the two of them, where the one that is coded as like innocent and devout is actually the one who is like struggling and lapsing. The one that's coded as like sort of punk and, going through the motions because of a family situation is actually the one who like came to it. Like she had a traumatic experience and is devout in her religion. The other person didn't and isn't. That recodes both of the characters in such an interesting way that like you are still chewing on that. For me, I was still chewing on that as the movie ended. There wasn't, I was not basically being like, oh, the story, the plot, the narrative. I was still re-feeling how I felt about these two characters and the way that they had presented themselves to the entire movie, and how clearly Mr. Reed knew something about the two of them, kind of immediately pegged which one was the devout one and which one wasn't, which is the richness of that interplay just gets added a little bit. So I agree from a horror standpoint, there aren't it doesn't go up, right? There isn't the escalation. It doesn't build to a climax or anything. It sort of does, but not in a way that I think is super effective. But the way that it continues to bounce characters off each other until the very end, I still couldn't get enough of that all the way up to the end.
And let me also just, if I haven't made it clear, I am enamored with Hugh Grant in this movie. I want to make sure that is, my thoughts on the overall film and the writing and all that other stuff. That's aside from the fact that I think Hugh Grant should be recognized at the end of the year for what he accomplishes here. I think I'm in line with you. One of his best performances. What's to argue here? The birth control moment is so good. When he's able to pivot, and it's that idea that he can improv, like you said, in the character Mr. Reed. Yes. Let's say he's been caught, he's been called out, he knows that he's floundering, but he's still able to take a moment like that and turn it into some kind of like, you've been chipped scenario and keep the facade going, like keep the ruse running. That is so good. Stuff like that, tremendous. But on the other side of that, when he starts floundering and when he just has to keep making up story after story to keep things going, I just think it undercuts everything that has happened prior. And it is 100% to display how people get into positions of power today. It is 100% it's a cult leader thing. It's Chris Hemsworth in The Bad Times at El Royale, all that stuff, It's the nice looking guy who somehow has all the power. And like, what? How did that happen? Well, because you let it in a way and you just kind of kept going along with the story. But once that's revealed, it feels like a one-trick pony after that. It feels like, and that's the point. Yeah. I get it. That's the problem. I had the same conversation with Perry when we did this.
Okay.
But to me, that being the point and that being the one-trick pony of it all, it grows old. It grows stale because what was before is so engaging and interesting. Like you're doing so well prior to that. I have trouble separating the the two halves of this movie because of that reason. And that is preference again. Like, I am
Yep.
obviously not aligned with everyone on this, but I, I felt like the movie at that point just kept talking to me versus being a participant in what was happening, being enveloped in the conversation. I felt like that second half was just, hey, this is clever, right? Hey, this is cool, right? Do you see what we're doing here? We do over and over again.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not going to claim that this movie is going to hit the same way if you were not, in the thick of it from a religious standpoint than if you weren't, right? So like I think that this movie plays to its to its base, for lack of a better word. And I think, I'm Team Perry on your conversation. I think that the amount of sweatiness in trying to maintain a lie, even if you'd like, even though the purpose of that is the meta commentary about like the amount of sweatiness it takes to maintain some of these like fake religions, I think that like it still works. It is a hat on a hat on a joke. Like you're supposed to be like, oh, look at Mr. Reed, then you're supposed to be like, oh, but actually, like, how is some of this stuff any different than that? So it's meta commentary. It may not work for everyone. I also want to note, like, listen, I'm recently accepting, embracing the fact that I would describe myself as an atheist. It's been a very, very long journey. By that I mean that I don't believe in God. I'm not an evangelical atheist. I don't think that I am absolutely right and everybody else is wrong. I just sort of have to choose parameters under which to live my life, right? And these are the parameters that I believe in. So like I have a lot of respect for my friends that are religious, but I know that there is a process of losing my faith that I felt was a long and a weird and a winding road. And there are these like little elements in the performance that Chloe East gives. The thing that like you doubled down the hardest, closest to the end, right? Sort of like that death rattle of being like, if I can just do this one thing, then you know this identity that I've constructed for myself that I've spent so much time building my entire persona around, like I don't have to give that up. If I can just go to this guy's house and I can convert him, and even in the middle of it be like, all right, if I can just get out on the other end of it, like, okay, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in there that I recognize and I really respond to, and that is going to shape how long you're willing to sit with the twists and turns of the end, because it does get sweaty. Getting sweaty is the point, and that's not a balance that's going to work for everybody, because it's sort of the what was the movie the other day that I was talking about, where Scream, when I finally saw Scream 5, right? Like making a movie that says, this town has a Skywalker problem, but also still having a Skywalker problem, still not being able to get past Sidney Prescott in your movie. Like it doesn't matter if you point it out and be like, hey, here's the thing. You're still gonna People are gonna watch it and be like, this would have been better without her, or it should have just been entirely about her, whatever your opinion is. So I think that this is like that, in the sense that like if it's basically like religion is bad, it still doesn't excuse the fact that the movie goes there in the end a little bit. And I can totally understand why you wanted it to be a better horror film than a theological crisis of faith when it mattered most in the last 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, and I mean, I can totally appreciate where you're coming from as well, because I'm not gonna say falling out of love with religion. I very much went to CCD. I got baptized. I got all that stuff. I did
Yeah, we
everything.
all did. We never
We
had a
all did,
choice in that.
exactly.
Yeah, we didn't have a choice.
We didn't have a choice, but I was always a skeptic. I was always just doing it because we had to, as you just said. There was no choice in it. And the minute I moved out, I stopped going to church. It's the simple stuff of, I don't know if I don't believe anymore. I think there might be a level of belief, and it's good to have that. I also think it's healthy to fear things and death and all this stuff, because the idea that I've kind of latched onto since I have abandoned that is the fact that, yeah, what if there is nothing after this? Then I want to make sure I want to get everything out of life that I can. And that has helped me. And I think the way that I kind of never was deeply invested in religion, and it was easy just to sidestep, going to church every week and all that stuff. Yeah, it made, I don't want to say less impactful. I don't want to say
Yeah.
it hit less, but at the same time, where you are so ingrained, and like you said, you're watching the sisters and you're reliving things in your head and you understand exactly where they are. I was never, I wasn't walking around door to door. I wasn't part of that. So for me, it's good. It's an entertaining encapsulation of a conversation I wholly understand and can get behind. And I think it's great. But I don't have that. You're right. So
Yeah.
that's, where you're coming from is different strokes. It's parts of life. Every horror movie you're going to bring parts of us into, and I'm trying to think of something that like I bring myself very deeply into. But yeah, like when I watched The Farewell, not a horror movie, my grandma
Yep.
just died, so it's like
Mm-hmm.
I need to see that movie right then, and that will forever be part of my life because of it. So it's the emotional quality of cinema that we don't sometimes give enough or pay enough attention to.
Yeah. Yeah, you think, does representation in film matter? Well, I watched a movie about somebody who was religious passing and it's a horror film. It is the smallest, most barest amount of representation I could look for, but it's the right representation for me in the right year. And I love Heretic as a result of that. And honestly, I just want to give another shout out. Like Thatcher and Grant are set up for success. Chloe East carries the movie. She has I think the toughest role of the three of them with the character that she's asked to play. I was really I like Thatcher. I've always liked Thatcher. She's great in a lot of, she's great in Yellow Jacket, she's great in a lot of other stuff. Chloe East had a lot of work to do in order to make the thing land. So, new fan for life, Chloe. Good job in that movie.
Yeah, well performed. And for me, not appreciating the end like some other people, I still think Beck and Woods did pretty well with the challenge they set out for themselves. Let's put it that way. I
Yeah.
will be in line for whatever they do next. Obviously, the successes of their past plus this. Of course, they're going to try something crazy. If you're trying Heretic, you're going to keep pushing boundaries, and I adore that. But when you push boundaries, sometimes you're not going to win over every crowd, and that's just kind of where this is. But we're also forgetting the jump scare of Topher Grace.
Topher Grace is great. Yeah, it's a weird thing to bring out. He's not in the movie that much, as you know, because you're listening and you've already seen it. Um, Man, what does it say about Topher Grace that I was like, yeah, I buy him as a Morbin. That poor guy.
And just for him to show up like you just said, when I'm looking at him going, is that, yeah, that is Topher Grace, and you're just showing up for a bit part in Heretic. Amazing.
I love that. Honestly, though, I mean, my final word on Heretic, it is a horror movie about losing your faith that features a prolonged monologue about board games. There was never not going to be for me. This movie was built in a lab for me. If I didn't love it, I have to question everything that I know, and I've already done that once. I don't want to do it again in life.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most monocle movie I think I've ever watched.
Oh,
And I've watched some goddamn monocle movies before, but this was, I'm sitting Fantastic Fest going, oh, we're going to have a fun conversation about this one.
Yep. 2 theaters over, and you were like, I could feel it. All right, well there it is. Go watch Heretic. It is an interesting stand-in for the Thanksgiving conversations you may or may not have because you may or may not be going home this year. It'll scratch that itch a little bit for you. So I always say that I watch horror movies to, vent and to process anxiety in a safe space. I feel like Heretic is a really good safe space for you to vent and process any religious anxiety or ennui you may be having with your family in the year of our Lord 2024.
Yep. And the grand question of, is it a monocle movie or a Donato movie? This
Oh,
couldn't be any more monocle. And
we
I'm not
answered
going to
that.
say it's totally not a Donato movie, but you take this one, it's yours. I don't hate it. I just didn't jive with it, and that's where we are.
Yeah, the Venn diagram. It's sometimes the slice. Every now and then, it's just two circles. This is definitely a lot more in my circle than I think it is in yours. So that's totally fine. Donato, you wrote a really good piece today about the state of the horror genre. You're about to embark on your end of year watches and listicles and all that kind of good stuff. It's already November, early November. People want to connect with you on social media. Where do they go?
You can find me at Donatobomb, DONATOBOMB, on reluctantly still Twitter, but Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. Those are where we are. And maybe, listen, maybe not all those places someday soon. We're still just trying to feel things out and try to feel a little normal, but as time goes, we're going to find how that goes.
You can find me on Blue Sky, Monocle at bluesky.social. Certified Forgotten, still at all the places at Twitter, at Blue Sky, at Instagram, at Facebook. If you have noticed that the amount of articles and essays being published on the site has slowed down a little bit, it's because we're in the middle of our migration, our transition to our new platform. So please bear with us. We promise we haven't completely changed our business model on you. We are still focused on publishing original film criticism about underseen and underappreciated horror films. Just right now, we don't have a consistent website to put people towards. So you're just going to see a little bit of stuff from Donato and I for the foreseeable future. But soon, very soon, you go to www.certifiedforgotten.com. You're going to see a brand new bag, baby. You're going to love it. I promise.